which is regarding the India's West Asia 2.0 from the oil diplomacy to the strategic interdependence. Revitalization of the relations between India and the West Asian region, that India ka trade with that region is going to get boosted. Saudi Arabia, it is basically a strategic pivot partner. The consumption of the Indian products in that region, that can boost the trade between these two regions, right? So India is also collaborating with the countries like Israel along with the UAE. India and Russia collaboration and the rupee ruble related trade, and despite the sanctions from the side of the United States, we are still dealing. That's why there has to be the dehyphenation, there has to be the strategic autonomy that should be there in order to ensure that Indian interests should be only guided by the India's approach. The India First initiative or India First policy is very, very important. Hello everyone, I am Vishal Sir, and today we are going to discuss a very important topic from the perspective of international relations, which is regarding the India's West Asia 2.0 from the oil diplomacy to the strategic interdependence. So recently, Prime Minister has conducted the three countries visit, which includes the countries like Jordan, Ethiopia, and Oman. Now, these particular countries, from the perspective of India's look west policy or from the perspective of strengthening the ties with the Gulf country and the West Asian countries, this is going to be the significant game changer in this specific scenario. Now, talking about like why this particular visit was important, and along with that, has India changed something substantially as far as its look west policy is concerned? How the things are now being changed from the perspective of like previously they were mainly focusing upon the remittances and diaspora along with the oil diplomacy, but now how the economic domain, how the connectivity, how different other strategic aspects are being emphasized, and that can be visible also in the form of the recent signing of certain free trade agreement, which is the comprehensive economic partnership agreements. Now, in all these scenarios, it is very, very important that this topic, which is the India's strategic pivot to the West Asia, is going to be important even from the perspective of the UPSC examination, right? So in today's discussion, we are going to comprehensively cover regarding brief idea of like what India is doing with different countries, specifically in the West Asian region. Now, as you can see on this particular map, this is depicting the region of West Asia and North Africa. And when we talk about this West Asian region, generally because of every reason you are seeing this particular region in the news. A few days back, there was conflict that was going on between the Iran and Israel. And in that particular scenario, US also got mixed into that particular conflict, right? So when these situations are occurring and when the West Asia is becoming the hotspot of major issues, in that scenario, this has to be discussed. So the geography is a very, very important aspect for the West Asia, which is holding certain choke points. For example, here, if you are able to see, this is the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. Here you can see the Strait of Hormuz, right? Now, these are the prominent choke points along with the Suez Canal. So this ensures that this region will always be there in news because of certain reasons. And that's why it is to be discussed comprehensively. Now, talking about what is the West Asia 2.0. So in order to understand that, first we have to understand that what India was doing as part of the West Asia 1.0 policy. So since independence, India has ensured certain policies towards the West Asia. We know that the majority of the country in this particular region are the Islamic nations. And that's why, considering the Indian population and along with that Indian diaspora residing in those particular countries, it has to be very, very important that we would have maintained comparatively better relation. Along with that, that region was important from the perspective of the oil and natural gases. So since India is a major importer for the oil and natural gases, that's why having robust and the good relation was also very, very important. So the energy security, diaspora, and diaspora ke through, it is the remittances which are very, very important aspects that had to be taken into consideration, and that's why the relations got strengthened. Initially, it was mainly focusing upon these aspects. Along with that, India also maintained the political caution, means in order to ensure that India should not get involved in the major conflict in that particular region, but at the same time ensuring the fulfillment of the interest of the Indians in that region. Along with that, the Arab-Israel binary. So there was historical conflict between the Arab and Israel, And that's how it is very, very important in order to understand that whatever policies India is going to take, that policy is going to be reflected in this particular form. And that also had to be avoided. That's why India tried to, in the cautious manner, tried to ensure relation between both the worlds. Now, talking about what has been changed now, so there has been a strategic pivot now. Now, what type of strategic pivot? That we know that energy security is there, we know that diaspora is there, but something has to be boosted up now. There is economic cooperation, there are strategic cooperation, there are defense based cooperation that also has to be taken into prominence, and that are shaping the present day relationship between these two regions. Now, talking about West Asia 2.0, so since 2014 onwards, there have been revitalization of the relations between India and the West Asian region. And in that, obviously, these factors are going to play a very important role. But beyond that, we have to also think from the perspective of the strategic calculations. So the transactional energy dependence to now the strategic economic interdependence. And that's what is visible right now also. Whether you talk about the signing of the CEPA, which is the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with the UAE in 2022, and later on now in 2025 with Oman, the similar type of agreement which is focusing upon that India ka trade with that region is going to get boosted. Now, when we talk about with UAE, obviously the trade volume is high. With Oman, it is right now comparatively low, but Oman can also provide the opportunity for India to boost its trade, because it is also having the linkage with the United States as far as the trade relations are concerned. So these things has to be thought in mind when we are talking about the changing of the relation between the India and West Asia. Now, talking about certain specific regions in this entire West Asian region. First is regarding the Gulf core, which is the Gulf countries, specifically the GCC member countries and certain other countries of the Gulf, which are very, very important from the strategic calculation of India's perspective, in that the Saudi Arabia is a very, very prominent country. Now, talking about Saudi Arabia, it is basically a strategic pivot partner, because see, Saudi Arabia has the potential, Saudi Arabia has the resources, Saudi Arabia is having the deep pockets, the investment that Saudi Arabia can bring to India also, right? So in that particular manner, the strategic pivot partner can be very, very important in the terms of Saudi Arabia. It is the second largest crude oil supplier. Right now, the crude oil lead is being taken by Russia. But after that, if you talk about the West Asian region, it is specifically the Saudi Arabia. And along with that, the trade volume is also decent. It is $52 billion. So India is having the vision of 2030 where we want to boost the trade volume and also along with the investment related things. And the target has been kept as the $100 billion. So this is the step ahead in that particular regard, right? Along with that, the Strategic Partnership Council where we can collaborate better, where we can boost our relation with this particular region in a better manner. Talking about the next prominent country, which is the UAE, United Arab Emirates, right? Now, if the Saudi Arabia is the strategic pivot, the UAE is the economic core of this entire West Asia policy of India. When we talk about the economic anchor or the economic core, basically it is the country with which India had signed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement in 2022. And whether you talk about investment, whether you talk about trade, this is the country which is dominating despite having small size, but then this particular country is providing a lot of economic collaboration with India. So you can see the $85 billion trade volume reflects that what type of relation India and UAE is having. And not only the economic one, even in the strategic domain also, if you see that the policies that generally the government of India is taking, those policies are being supported by specifically the country like Oman and UAE. So that's why this is very, very important. Next is Qatar. Obviously, if Saudi Arabia is very, very important from the perspective of the oil, the Qatar is very, very important from the perspective of the LNG and along with the diaspora. So there is large amount of Indian diaspora residing in the region of Qatar, right? So 40% of the roughly 40% of the India's LNG import, roughly 7 lakh plus Indian diaspora in a very small region, Qatar. That's why the Qatar also is very, very important. And when there is diaspora, obviously there is going to be the remittances. That remittances is there. Along with that, the economic collaboration with that region, the consumption of the Indian products in that region, that can boost the trade between these two regions, right? Next is the Oman. Now, above three we have discussed. This is for the oil perspective along with the strategic one. This is for the economic perspective. This is the diaspora and the natural gas. Now, when we talk about Oman, Oman is comprehensively combining all these things. So along with these advantage, Oman is also having the strategic advantage. Now I would like to take you again back to this particular map, jahan pe you can see the location of Oman, right? Very near to the Strait of Hormuz. This is going to be a very important player as far as the strategic dynamics between India and this region is concerned. Now you can see the choke point is very, very near to Oman, right? And that's why this is going to be the very important partner. Along with that, recently in the Prime Minister's recent visit, there has been signing of the comprehensive economic partnership agreement. That means kahin na kahin this is again gaining the prominence. We have the defense related collaboration, we are doing the military exercises, we are doing the air exercises. Along with that, we are also having now the CEPA, which is the comprehensive economic partnership agreement. So the relationship is going in the multi-dimensional manner. Roughly $10.6 billion ka trade hai. That is comparatively lesser, but yes, if the CEPA is now signed, the chances are very high that this is going to reflect in the upcoming 5 years where the trade volume is going to get boost. And right now, when India के context में Oman ने लगभग 98% of products के ऊपर ड्यूटीज को कम किया है. Along with that, India is also going to follow the similar path. Roughly 75 to 85% के around products पे India is going to reduce the duties. So that means the trade or the bilateral trade is going to get a boost. And along with that, not only trade, even in the service context, this is going to be a very important deal. Because there is a mutual recognition, there is also the expatriate from India to that particular region, long-term visas, all these things provides the Oman now a specific place or a very important strategic place in the Indian foreign policy calculations, specifically from the West Asian region. So the port is there where the Indian Navy is utilizing this port, right? Kuwait and Bahrain, though the smaller countries, but still substantial, whether you talk about diaspora and remittances, the oil related thing, specifically from Kuwait, right? So that is also very, very important. Now, what are the other major player other than the Gulf core? So other than Gulf core, there is Israel. With Israel, we all know that there is a strategic partnership that India is having. So India is also collaborating with the countries like Israel along with the UAE. So I2U2 type of agreements that we had signed. Along with that, technology, defense, agriculture, strategic aspects, cyber security, where Israel is playing a very, very important role as far as its relation with India is concerned. And that's why India is ensuring the de-hyphenation. That means our relation with Israel are not going to get impacted by whatever the relations with the West Asian countries other than Israel are concerned. And that's why India is trying to ensure the strategic balance. So these are the areas. Along with that, we are doing the joint collaboration for the defense related productions, Barak missiles, right? So that's why it is also very, very important. Next is Iran. Now, Iran, we can consider that this is going to be the test of the India's strategic autonomy. Why? Because see, if you talk about Iran, Iran is specifically one such country which can provide India the continental access to the countries like Afghanistan, countries like the Central Asian countries. India's INSTC also passes through Iran. So that's why this is going to be very, very important aspect from the foreign policy calculation. And Chabahar port is one such thing which India has developed in that particular region, and that can provide the strategic access if the region remains conflict free. But the problem is that there are sometimes conflict that is centering Iran. So there is the strategic autonomy, then Chabahar port, then the continental connectivity, balancing Saudi and the Israel access. These are going to be very, very important. So if we talk about three prominent countries, it is Saudi, it is Israel, and it is Iran, which are strategically very, very important. Talking about the Egypt, so Egypt is in the North Africa region, right? So when we talk about the West Asia holistically, and when we talk or give the aspect to the Middle East, so this also include the Egypt. So the North Africa ke saath linkage, linking other regions. Along with that, the Suez Canal, which is very, very important choke point, which is being controlled by the country like Egypt. Along with that, the strategic partnership that recently we had signed. So that also makes Egypt a very important partner in that particular region. Now, along with that, it's not like that only country. We are also working through certain projects. For example, there is the IMEC, which is India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So in 2023 G20 summit, which had held in India, there this particular proposal was taken, and this connectivity was being ensured, jahan par there are going to be the two aspect or the two phases. This is the eastern wala connectivity and this is the northern connectivity. In the eastern connectivity, India is going to get connected with the Gulf region, but then from Gulf region till the Europe, it is going to be the northern route. So eastern route में India से लेकर UAE तक, then UAE के through UAE, Saudi Arabia, then Israel, then to Greece, and then to entire Europe. So this is one such connectivity, but it's not the sole connectivity. We also know that from here, from India, there is Iran. Iran के through you are reaching to Russia, which is the INSTC का objective. Along with that, we are having the strategic choke points over here. So from here, this is the Suez Canal route. So IMEC is providing an alternative to India's multi-route diplomacy in this particular region is concerned. क्योंकि what India is trying to ensure is India had to reach if to the region of Europe, India can take any of these routes, multiple routes, the limitations that are going to get reduced. And that's why it is very, very important from the strategic perspective. Now, you are already aware regarding near the Somalia or in this particular part of the Indian Ocean, this is impacted by the issues like piracy. This is impacted by the issues like the non-state actors. And here the Indian Navy is very, very active in this particular region, whether you talk about the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, whether you talk about the Red Sea region, or whether you talk about the western part of the Indian Ocean. So that's why it is also going to be very, very important. Along with that multiple route, the lesser will be the cost. क्योंकि जब आपके पास ज्यादा रूट है तो ऐसा नहीं है ना कि if there is one region that is in the conflict, let's say Iran is in conflict, this particular route might get impacted, but what about the other route? Other route will be there. If this region is there in conflict, this route will be functional. So the point is that diversification is always needed as far as the foreign policy is concerned. Next is regarding the security, terrorism and maritime stability. Now that's what I was talking about, the role of Indian Navy in this particular region. The Navy is playing very important role. Navy is doing multiple exercises with different countries, collaborating through the independent forces which are deployed in that region in order to counter the issues of piracy or the pirates attack, right? Or the attacks from the side of the non-state actors. So intelligence sharing with the Gulf states, whether that there are any type of threat that are available in that region and how to counter that. India is comparatively larger country having the strengthened army and the naval forces, and in that particular sense India can provide the strategic advantage to these countries, but provided with there is a mechanism to share the intelligence. So this is also being right now chalked out. Along with that, Indian Navy's presence in the region of Oman, Red Sea, Western Indian Ocean that we have already talked about. So this is also very, very important aspect, right? Now, this is the conventional thing, which is again going to be very, very important because देखो, ऐसा तो नहीं है कि if we are moving towards the West Asia 2.0, we are going to forget whatever we had during the West Asia 1.0. So in that particular sense, diaspora is going to be very, very important. Yes, the things which were functioning previously, for example, जो unskilled या low skilled labor थे, now that is being skilled, that is being provided with the skills, and the high skilled migration is also taking place. So when the region is not only dependent upon the oil and natural gases, they are also investing, they are also creating the infrastructure. So the Indian people who are having skills, who are having the capability to contribute there, so they are also migrating. The service sector, that is also contributing now, right? So this is going to further increase. Right now it is roughly 9 million plus diaspora. So if you talk about the recent data of diaspora, roughly 35 million around diaspora hai. Us diaspora mein it is roughly 9 million plus coming from this region only. This is the Gulf region के बारे में mainly that this diaspora number is all about. The Gulf also talks about the 40% of remittances. Now you can assume that roughly 9 million is, you can assume like roughly 30%, but at the same time this accounts for 40% of the remittances. 35 to 40% of the remittances are coming from this region. And these remittances are also going to give the help with respect to the development of India. And along with that, the investments are coming. Along with that, when this much diaspora is there, Indian products are going to get consumed more. If India is going to further sign the CEPA or the other type of the free trade agreement in that region, that is also going to boost the relationship between these two regions, right? And that's why this region is again gaining prominence. And right now, not because of certain things which is affecting the India's internal aspect, like maybe the religion wala aspect, but more than that, the strategic calculation that is changing the dynamics between India and the West Asia. Lastly, shift from the low skill to the high skill migration. That's what the service sector is mainly about, right? Now, Having discussed about these things, now what are the opportunities that India is having in this region and what might be certain challenges? So when we talk about the opportunity, first thing that India is striving for is the economic diversification. We are signing the free trade agreements, we are signing the comprehensive economic partnership agreements, we are emphasizing upon the services sector, we are talking about that how the mobility of those people who are the skilled people can enhance in that particular region. So this is very, very important. Along with that, the energy transition partnership, right? So it's not only about the oil and natural gases, but even about the renewable energy. So that's why majority of these countries are also part of the International Solar Alliance, which is the India-led initiative. Along with that, a lot of other things which are there where these countries along with India can contribute significantly. Talking about the strategic autonomy, so since this region is again and again there in news because of the conflict that are pertaining to this region, the strategic autonomy that India is leading with, that India is not actively participating in the war, but at the same time, India is playing a very important role in order to ensure the prevention of the conflict at the first place in this particular region. Lastly, talking about the Global South leadership. So India is organizing Voice of Global South Summit and many such summits, including the G20 Summit of 2023, jahan par these countries were also, the majority of these countries were also part of that particular summit, right? Now, everything is not that good. There are certain challenges that we also have to accept, and even the foreign policy domain also accept that there are certain issues while dealing with this particular region. First is the regional conflict. So whenever the regional conflicts are there, the religion is also sometime coming in the news, and that's why there may be certain issues that can be further aggravated when we are dealing with this. Next is the oil price volatility right now. So because of the India and Russia collaboration and the rupee ruble related trade, and despite the sanctions from the side of the United States, we are still dealing. So the oil price volatility is right now prevented. But suppose karo if there is further conflict in the West Asian region, so India's supply from this region is going to get crippled, and that's how there may be the volatility in the oil prices. Next is the over dependence on the remittances. This is also very, very important. So kahin na kahin till this point of time, the remittances are one such prominent thing. अगर if the remittances are roughly $130 billion, तो यहाँ से from this particular region roughly 35 to 40% of remittances are coming. That means this is the major chunk. Now if the conflict is going to be there in that particular region, those remittances are also going to get impacted. So the volatility, not only with respect to the oil and natural gas, it is also with respect to the remittances and even with respect to the security of diaspora. That's why India is taking lead in order to actively engage with these particular partners and ensuring that the interest of the Indians should get protected in that particular region. And that's how India is playing a strategic pivot wala role in this specific region. And this region is also, from the perspective of Indian foreign policy, is a strategic pivot. Now, finally, when we talk about that India is dealing with this particular region, the way ahead should be that more economic engagement, diversification of engagement, the investment, along with that the strategic partnership and the de-hyphenation, which is going to be the key. Because if the relation with one country are going to get impacted with and because of the relation with other countries, then there will be always division in the foreign policy domain. That's why there has to be the de-hyphenation, there has to be the strategic autonomy that should be there in order to ensure that Indian interests should be only guided by the India's approach. The India first initiative or India first policy is very, very important while dealing with these countries are concerned. So I hope that whatever we have discussed, because everything is important from the GS paper 2 perspective, and the way UPSC is asking question, this strategic and the thought process wala aspects can be important in order to substantiate your argument with respect to the answer. So I hope the things are clear to you. We'll meet again in the next week with another interesting topic from the perspective of international relations. Thank you, everyone.